is our friends in Canada, whom we look up to. I was up there, I don't know, 9 years ago. I did a live show, 2 live shows from Canada about their healthcare system, interviewing the people who built their universal healthcare system. The Canadians have not always and forever had, we would call it free healthcare, which is what you get for in your taxes. The way we get military in the United States in our taxes. You don't think about, do I have a military if I need one? No, it's there. Do I have a fire department? Gee, no, it is there. Do I have police? We have it. It's automated, as is healthcare in Canada. But they fought tooth and nail to have it, and we are bitterly jealous. Bitterly, because you don't get turned away. Thankfully, we now have no pre-existing conditions and other things, thanks to President Obama, thanks to the Affordable Care Act. Still imperfect, still evolving, still trying to hold on to that piece of wizardry. But the Canadians have a pretty good deal, and you don't die for generally being ignored unless you opt in or someone opts in for you to MAID service. Huh? Yep, MAID, MAID service. And you're wondering, what the hell is that? And I did not know much about it until I saw some interesting background information. And the man I'm about to introduce in just a moment, who has brought this to light, brought it to the fore. MAID, MAID, of which many of our listeners happen to have one of those, pop in once a week, make things look nice. What this stands for in Canada is medical assistance in dying. Now, sounds okay, doesn't it? Washington State for years has been a place where maybe you could go, and if you had a terminal disease, you might be able to get away with it. Switzerland has a whole tourist industry in assisted death at beautiful, expensive spas and lots of music and aromatherapy, massages, and off you go. They don't advertise it because the Swiss have a tough enough time trying to not be connected to banks and World War II Nazi gold and oil paintings. But they run that kind of service. But the Canadians actually run that service. And if you're Canadian and you have become or been viewed as a burden on society, you can be dispatched just like that. If you're homeless and you don't have a place to live and it looks kind of difficult, maybe they'll just get rid of you that way too. Now, this sounds shocking. It sounds like it can't be happening. Justin Trudeau, he's a very handsome man. Wouldn't happen, not with a handsome president. Not in a million years. Well, guess what? More to come. Let me start, before we introduce our guest, I'm going to play you a clip from a news piece where this was covered, and this is on the CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Company, which would be like our NBC, our CBS, our NBC. And they're doing a story on this about a paraplegic woman who was an ex-veteran, another way that they like to get rid of veterans, it turns out. And she was having troubles getting a place to live, so they offered to kill her and make her just go away and get rid of a burden on the system. Funny how all of this tends to harken back to the Third Reich. That was their exact term. People living burdensome lives were removed in their Tiergarten 4 policy. If you were kids, they threw you in the back of a school bus, ran the exhaust pipe in the back, and Bob's your uncle. Didn't look twice, didn't think twice about it. It has the same grim effect. Listen to this news piece.
Well, there is a startling new development in the ongoing controversy around veterans being offered medical assistance in dying. A retired corporal who is paraplegic shocked MPs in Ottawa yesterday when she told them an employee of Veterans Affairs Canada offered her help with arranging a medically assisted death. Natalie Collada has been on the story for us this morning, and she joins us again. So, Natalie, what more can you tell us?
Well, Hillary, we know that this is the latest incident that we are hearing about. It is coming from retired corporal and Paralympian Christian Gauthier. Yesterday, she testified that the Department of Veteran Affairs offered her in writing the opportunity for a medically assisted death. Even, she said, offering to provide the equipment. Now, Gauthier said she had been fighting for a home wheelchair ramp for 5 years. She described the letter she received from the department in French at the committee hearing. Here's more from her.
With respect to MAID, I have a letter in my file because I had to face that as well. I have a letter saying that if you are so desperate, madam, we can offer you MAID, medical assistance in dying.
Now, Gauthier did not say when the offer was made to her, but she did agree to provide the committee a copy of the letter. We do know last week the Minister of Veteran Affairs told the committee that there were 4 or 5 veterans who had a similar experience, who were given the MAID option. The Veteran Affairs, the department there, could not confirm whether the incident was new or already being investigated. One of the ones already being investigated. What we do know is that the Veteran Service agent who allegedly provided the advice has been removed from her post while both the department and the RCMP investigate.
Well, there you have it. The little audio scratches there from a bad lavalier microphone of the reporter who was live at the scene on the time at the CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting System, one of their network news channels. A corporal. We have veterans all over our sidewalks, all over Los Angeles, 100,000 homeless people. That's if you're counting, but they don't really count it. So they sort of guess. A full quarter are veterans. A lot have come back from Iraq, Afghanistan, living in tents, and the Canadians have found a way to purge some of these problems. Will it be coming to the United States? Well, we don't have that exact answer, but who better to describe the situation than a man whom you've heard on KPFK, I think probably a few times in the past here or there, but it's my first pleasure to bring him on this specific topic. His name is Keith McHenry, and he's co-founder of the global Food Not Bombs movement. And one of the things he's been done is looking around in this, because of these reports on medically assisted dying, or MAID cases. Is that not the most perfect government acronym? I mean, George Orwell could not have come up with a better one and made it sound lovely. MAID cases, where a person doesn't seek to end their life because they have a terminal illness, but because they are poor and facing homelessness. And the government even puts it in writing that they'll just dispatch you if, you feel like you're at the end and, you can't find enough support, they'll just have you killed. And then that looks good on the books for the Canadian government. They can show that their costs are being maintained. And meanwhile, you just remove the sector of society that's poor, unwashed, and unperfumed. Let me welcome you right now, Keith McHenry, to the Cary Harrison Show. I do thank you for showing up right now.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's beautiful.
This is a video stream, so people can catch this at caryharrison.com later, or probably on our KPFK Cary Harrison page. We'll be able to see you and the clips, Keith McHenry. I painted a picture. It is an incomplete picture. Maybe you could fill in some of the blanks for people.
Yeah, so I first became concerned about this when I saw Amir Farad in St. Catharines, Ontario, which is a place I've spent some time. We have a local Food Not Bombs chapter there. Brock College is there. And he was telling the newscaster, CityNews in Canada, that he could not face homelessness. He could not find a home. He was approximately my age. I'm 65. And he just couldn't bear becoming homeless. So he signed up for MAID. And he didn't want to die, but he didn't want to be homeless. And so he decided that he would, be medically assisted in dying. Fortunately, he withdrew from the program after that show, but it showed that there was many, many people, including my best friend's aunt, did MAID in Canada and British Columbia, and then his other aunt was considering it, and fortunately his mother talked her out of it. So this is, and they were basically fine, healthy people. They were just very old. And I then looked into it more, and I found out that, for instance, a woman whose name is used as Sophia in British Columbia could not find adequate housing for a chemical sensitivity that she had. So she was the first person who signed up for MAID that I'm aware of that went through with it, just because she couldn't find appropriate housing. And then and I know, so to me, it's really traumatic because I was diagnosed with a terminal illness. I would never recover from it. I would suffer the rest of my life. And many people with the same illness, approximately half of them, would commit suicide within 5 to 10 years because it was just so brutal. But I happened to be given the gift of medically supervised water-only fast, and within 30 days, I was cured of something I'd suffered for 20 years. And I could have gone the same way as people who were suffering like this. And so it just profoundly disturbed me that this would happen. And particularly most of the reports that I have read have been people that could not find housing and then signed up for medically assisted help in dying. And I find that really shocking. And I know that, there was a number of reports where one woman said she went to the doctor. The doctor said, look, it's going to cost you $1,500 a day to be in the hospital. You might want to think about that. Maybe you should sign up for MAID. And there's report after report on this being a savings to the National Health Service in Canada, and also saving for to the community, because then they wouldn't have to be taken care of like with wheelchair ramps or any of these other things like that. And it's just shocking that they got money to have wars all over the world, but they don't have money to take care of their own veterans or of their own citizens when they need help.
Keith McHenry, to your point, they don't have money because we, the public, are told there is no money. It's a choice. Just exactly as you said, you can have all the money you want if you just want to put it over here. But for some reason, poor people are unattractive. You can't they don't look good on TV. They're not fun to talk about. They're sort of in the way. And the people who have power, this is not Greece or somewhere under Aristotle where everyone is sort of equal and there's a plebiscite. The people who have the power, as we've seen in the last 20 years, have all aggregated to the top, and they're very rich, much as our own Senate and Congress. You really can't go in if you don't have at least $1 million to start, kind of like having a nice hotel room on a certain island. And those people have found the cure to the problem that plagues them on the streets. It's only a problem because the regular people, you and me, driving to Ralph's or the grocery store, encounter dejected, abandoned people living in tents, living in their own excreta. I mean, my God, rats, cholera in the middle of Los Angeles. Cholera! This is the place of the Kardashians. When you turn on your television set and don't live in Los Angeles, you actually think it's swimming pools and movie stars. You think we have it together. But then you find out we don't, and that needs to go away. So I'm concerned, and we're going to answer this at the other side of this piece of audio. What will this mean once we catch on here? And why don't you tee up Keith McHenry, the co-founder of Global Food Not Bombs movement, where you've also been kicked out of lots of places because you bring up the stuff that nobody wants to hear about. But here's a commercial that you brought to my attention from La Maison Simon, which is somewhere in the French-speaking of Canada, and it is a lovely place, sort of a spa, much as I mentioned, that exists in Switzerland, where you can go and have MAID service. MAID, of course, being medical assistance in dying, courtesy of the Canadian government. So you just pay a little extra for your massage, your aromatherapy, maybe a hooker. I have no idea. But this is their advertising, how to polish you off. And the actor makes it sound like a lot of fun.
Last breaths are sacred. When I imagine my final days, I see bubbles. I see the ocean. I see music. Even now, as I seek help to end my life, there is still so much beauty. You just have to be brave enough to see it.
Well, there you have it, Kevin. You just have to be brave enough to say yes to the federal government of Canada's invitation to kill you.
Yeah, so, that was Jennifer Hatch. That was not an actor. She was 37. She actually was did not want to die, but she could not find help for her medical condition. After years and years of struggling, she finally gave up and signed up for MAID and signed up for this ad. And her family and friends were just mortified that she showed up in such an ad, and that it finally was actually, I think the company that put it out finally took it off of their website, but it's still on YouTube, and that's where I was able to give it to you. But it's shocking that you would be 37 years old. You know, 10 years from now, she could have been completely cured because of some kind of either invention that happened or some new medical something or other. And yet she ended her life so early. And the fact to make an ad that's sort of inviting you to be euthanized is really crazy. And then there was an AM radio station years ago in LA. I mean, the station's probably still there, but they ran a program. They had a shock, jockey who talked about a dog stepping in front of a truck, and he was mangy and died, and was killed by the truck on the 405. And so he thought, wow, this would be great. He started like a campaign to get a movement to have free euthanasia for homeless people in Los Angeles. And a lot of us, including, homeless rights advocates, we all protested that. And I think that's what is so horrible about this whole program is the fact that it is introducing the idea that it's okay, that life is so cheap that we're useless eaters, and that you can just it's not a problem to start offing yourself or others. And I am very, very concerned that we've known the Princeton eviction project said that over 40 million American families were going to face eviction because of the economic calamities around the pandemic. And no program really was set aside by either federal, state, or local governments to really address the fact that all these people are going to become homeless. And in our town here in Santa Cruz, California, their pre-pandemic proposal was to ship everyone to a military base in the middle of nowhere, and that's how they were going to solve the homeless problem. It's not long after, it's not hard to imagine that at this camp, if they decide to stop feeding you, they could offer you such a program as medically assisted aid in dying, or just stop feeding you and not letting you get out. And so the dehumanization of poor people, of homeless people, so many of the people I share food with on the streets of Santa Cruz every day, we will have done it for 1,000 days in a row this December 10th, because all the indoor soup kitchens closed due to the pandemic and have not reopened. Many of them are injured individuals who actually helped build our town and were injured in the process of constructing a building or pouring concrete. And now, their disability ran out, and now they're homeless. So they weren't really useless eaters. They're people that actually built our community. And I find that many of the unhoused, you start to hang out with them, talk to them, and I've been out, on the streets for years and years, have, they're not like, oh, wow, I think I'll become homeless. It's the coolest thing, urban camping. We all love it. No, they're forced through one medical I've been homeless 5 times, all for medical crises. And the one time where I was diagnosed, with a terminal illness and would always have to live with it the rest of my life. I got that news when I was homeless. Imagine if I got that news when I was homeless and I lived in Canada and they had this as a possible, route to go, and that doctors would be pressuring me to do it. So to save the medical system money. I mean, to me, it impacts me personally deeply. And I'm really worried we're opening a door where it's okay to just off poor people because they're a burden to society, as you had mentioned in the introduction. It's just outrageous.
Thank you, Keith McHenry. And I'm just going to jump in because unlike a podcast, we have to remind people who and what it is because they're driving, they get in and out of cars, and we're all used to podcasts. Like, I'm going to introduce the guest at the beginning. At the very end, I'll say who that was. But we're still using an antenna. So Keith McHenry is the co-founder of Global Food Not Bombs movement, and he's doing exactly this. It is, boy, you want hard work. You want to be doing the Lord's work. This is the stuff. And what we have learned today, just in a short conversation with him, which we will continue in just a moment, is we've learned, and he's using the loveliest word, euthanasia, which is what you might do for a cat, although then they more aggressively started, I put my dog down. Now, when I was growing up, you put a dog down because it had rabies. That's what you put down with a gun, rabies. You put something down. Now everyone takes their little kitty cat and puts it down. It's kind of brutal, but it's desensitized all of us, I think, to what's actually going on. Like somehow these creatures are not fulfilling a service, or they're not transactionally interesting anymore. And we're finding out that the Canadian government is in writing, getting military vets that it does not want to care for. It's expensive to handle a military vet if there's no housing, if they have physical problems that are only going to cause perpetual decompensation as a person ages. And all they have to do is convince them to just finish it. And they'll do it in a loving, caring way through their MAID service, which is medical assistance in dying. All of this very cynical and loud, but we down here are paying attention. And as Keith McHenry pointed out, there have been lots of regular talk radio on the AM band talking about what a great solution to get rid of the homeless problem. We're going to continue with Keith McHenry in just a minute, but I am obliged to take a second and talk a little bit about KPFK, because here we are at this holiday season looking to support, to save ourselves, and we're going to talk for just 2 minutes about that in just 2 minutes.
Uncensored, unexpurgated, and unapologetic. It's the Cary Harrison Show.
At Christmas time, there's nothing quite like gathering around the fireplace. But what if you don't have one?
Well, you better not cry and you better not pout, because we've got your flaming hot log action all day on Monday. It's non-stop, high-octane, hardwood fueled Yule log thunder. On Channel 11. Channel 11 brings you the 2006 Yule Log Winter National. Hot, cold-crushing, cinder-smashing log excitement all day long on Christmas Day. It's a Christmas conflagration, a Nitro Noel, an Extreme Xmas. And it's all day long on Monday. Grab Grandma, collect the kids, and take up the entire couch. But you'll only need the air. The 2-6 Yule Log Winter Nationals all day long on Channel 11. Turn it on and imagine the heat. Be there!
Any chance to poke a hot fire poker at TV is my favorite moment in the day. Cary Harrison with you. This is the Cary Harrison Show. You can get my free newsletter and get a lot of stuff that you won't be able to get given time on the radio and other things simply by going to caryharrison.com. Sign up for that free newsletter. It's yours. It will have stuff about this conversation we're having, clips, some screen grabs, and those videos, which you can also watch real time later on this afternoon by going to caryharrison.com. You'll see the entire video stream, including the ads, spots, and news reports that we played earlier, and you'll get to meet Kevin. At least you'll meet him. He may not meet you, but he'll know that he has been met, and we do love that part. Just a quick pause to remind you why it's important to become a KPFK sustaining member. Why? Because you get to control, help, and undergird, support, and make this kind of information possible. Do you think you're ever going to hear Keith McHenry on KFI? Hands up for yes. No hands. Yes, that's it. Done. Finished. No more story to tell. Move along. Nothing to see here. You're hearing him on the only radio station in Los Angeles, in the second largest city in the United States, following New York City. This is it. And when it appears here, when you bring Keith McHenry on, co-founder of Global Food Not Bombs movement, you bring him on here, people in other markets hear. Why? Because this particular show will render into a podcast. That podcast will end up on Spotify. It'll end up on Deezer. It'll end up on iHeart, on Apple iTunes, everywhere. People all over the country will get educated because of these single moments we do here on KPFK. So when you become a sustaining member of KPFK by calling 818-985-KPFK and making a donation that fits you, that fits your passion, that fits your desire to educate the other people in America who simply do not have access to this kind of information and will not have access to this information because in their little town, everything is owned by one company and that company is not based in that little town. They will have no access ever, 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 ever to anything. And by you becoming a sustaining member of KPFK and going to kpfk.org and making a donation securely and becoming a sustaining member, this level of education will go coast to coast, in fact, globally. People all over the world can hear an important story, a story that not only affects them everywhere else, but affects you here in Los Angeles. How often do you drive, going to work, going to the grocery store, going wherever you go here in LA, and you do not encounter a single homeless person or a tent? Never. You never go anywhere without encountering a single homeless person or a tent. We're told repeatedly and have been told there's nothing we can do. It's very difficult. A lot of mental illness. Yes, there's a lot of mental illness, but don't treat it. Treat it by letting them self-treat it in a tent. And then most cynically, we had LA City Council a couple of years ago recreate the unhoused as free-range humans, like a chicken that you would buy a lovely egg from the Whole Foods Corporation. It is a free-range human. In other words, they prefer to live in a tent, defecate in their tent, in their sleeping bag, and then live in that. Like, who doesn't want to do that? Free-range humans. That is as vile as calling the medical assisted death MAID service. I mean, really. So let's loop back and say hi to Keith McHenry. Again, kpfk.org. You can make a secure donation, become a sustaining member. Make this education go coast to coast at a time where 100% of us ask each other every day, but where do I find news? Where do I go? Look at what happened to CNN after Discovery bought it out. They have destroyed it on purpose because it was taken over by Wall Street guys who know nothing about the news, don't care about it, and by firing everybody, they just literally fired last week the entire marketing department of CNN in Los Angeles, in New York, all over the entire country. They had the best marketing department in the nation, by the way, all gone. They're laid off people, fired people, moved Don Lemon, whether you loved him or not. But at 10 p.m., he was doing a primetime show and at least trying to challenge the status quo. Now they've turned him into one of the girls, sipping coffee in the morning, and replaced his show with what? A girl. I mean, the kind that they have turned him into, and diminished all of this stuff and are literally destroying it. Why? Because when you come in, it's called fracking in business, different from fracking, shale oil fracking, same concept. You come in, you take something that's good and you destroy it. You poison it, like poisoning the water and fracking, and then you leave everyone with poisoned water. But what do you get? When you remove all of those jobs, all of those departments, you get a giant bonus. Like the head of Discovery making over $300 million a year, having absorbed CNN and destroying it. Does it help you and me, the little tiny mammals down here trying to figure out, should we turn left? Should we turn right? Is it safe to eat this? Can we go there? No. It hurts us and damages us and leaves us with even fewer places to go. I'm sorry, I'm passionate about KPFK, but thank God we have KPFK. Thank God we show up here as volunteers to make it happen, because if we don't, it won't happen. If I don't show up, then we don't get to hear from Keith McHenry. If he doesn't show up, you will never know what's coming down the pike. And if you know this is coming down the pike, what they're doing in Canada, and it looks like a really dandy solution to get rid of 100,000 homeless people, mentally ill people, depressed people, drug addicts, you name it, instead of treating them and dealing with them as reasonable human beings that they are, you may be dealing with your own addiction. Sorry, you're now in the crosshairs, just like everyone else. If you know this is happening, you can actually politically impede this, or at least steer it in a direction that your moral compass says yes. And that's why we're here, for this level of education. You can call a KPFK at 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735. Become a sustaining member at the level that you can, and know you're educating the people of Earth through this one amazing, unique, remaining radio station in the United States. This is it. And we're lucky we have the strongest FM signal west of the Mississippi, with repeating stations going all the way out to China Lake, middle of nowhere, literally, but down to San Diego, where we have military bases, where we have vets, where people that matter, that are potential victims of this, can hear this voice right here, right now, and possibly be helped because of you becoming a sustaining member. Go to kpfk.org and go ahead and become a sustaining member. I can't even talk anymore, which is probably music to some people's ears. Cary Harrison here. This is the Cary Harrison Show, live streaming, video streaming, which you'll be able to see at caryharrison.com, along with getting your free newsletter. We're talking to Keith McHenry, co-founder of Global Food Not Bombs movement, and he has revealed an extraordinary issue that's going on north of us in a country the size of California. And in that country the size of California, they have found a way to exterminate. Kevin likes to use the word euthanize, but it is, in fact, an extermination of a live human by convincing them that if their life is tough, or as the Germans called it in World War II, a burdensome life to live, or as Henry Kissinger famously coined it, a useless eater. He borrowed that, by the way, from the same Third Reich. It all comes from there. Let's just say it. So what they're doing is they're exterminating humans, and all you have to do is sign the dotted line. Now, you're wondering, well, who gets to do this? I am on the government website of Canada right now. Here's what it says verbatim. In order to be eligible for medical assistance in dying, you must meet all the following criteria. Oh, goody. It's like I get to be, in the cotillion, and I must meet the following criteria. I have to be eligible for health services funded by the federal government or a province or territory, or during the applicable minimum period of residence or waiting period for eligibility. That's a key note. In Canada, if you're American, you can't go in because there's a point system, as you could before, but you could go and find a way to stay an extra month, and you could even pay if you have enough money. You get a free pass and you get to suddenly be there. You have to be at least 18 years old and mentally competent, but it doesn't say that what mental competency is, other than being capable of making mental health care decisions for yourself, which if you're not mentally competent, you're going to make the wrong healthcare decisions for yourself. So all it has to do is you just have to agree. You make a voluntary request for medical death that is not the result of outside pressure or influence. So you just sign a form saying, I was not pressured by any outside person or influence. Well, okay, good enough for me. And to be considered, and they do allow people who are not Canadians. It says generally, visitors to Canada are not eligible for medical assistance in dying. I'm going to say that part again because it's key, and it's got a special kind of asterisk. Generally, visitors to Canada, that's Timmy going up for a little, snow skiing or snowboarding in Whistler. Generally, visitors to Canada are not eligible for medical assistance in dying. So yeah, generally they're not, and then a lot of them are. So this is what's going on. We're talking right now with our new friend here, an important, enlightened co-founder of Global Food Not Bombs, about this cynical move where we heard earlier that a corporal who had fought in the Canadian military, who is disabled because of it, but has become sort of a para-Olympian. She's able to lift weights and do lots of cool stuff, but is having trouble with housing. So in writing, the government offered to kill her and just relieve her of the pain in the ass of trying to, find a place to live. And so, Kevin, we were talking about that. And my question to you was this: let's look ahead. How does this affect the United States? Do they find this as sexy as the Canadians do?
This is what's frightening about this. So 11 states, including California, have the death with dignity laws that this started out to be 7 years ago in Canada, right? So the most recent state to enact this is New Mexico, and that's in March of 2021. And when this was initially introduced into Canada, as it was introduced here, the idea was that you are terminally ill, you're suffering, you're a lot of pain, and you're going to die relatively soon. So rather than, live out your life in this horrible pain for the next couple of months, you're going to have assisted suicide. So that somewhat sounds reasonable, I think, for many people.
Yeah.
But then it's the slippery slope thing. So now you've got to the point where in March of 2023, if you're a Canadian and you have a mental health issue, you qualify for MAID. So what you just read about being mentally competent. So if you're depressed in March of next year, and it's just so, and I've known people that were horribly depressed for years and years, and they suffered, that you can, apply to have yourself euthanized. So the other thing is, imagine in the United States, when you become, like I say, I've been homeless 5 times. The post-traumatic stress and the horribleness of facing eviction and that struggle to not be evicted, or whatever the situation is that ultimately ends you end up on the streets. And then just the it is tough living on the streets, trying not to be beaten up, raped, all the different things that occur when you are unprotected and you're living in a flimsy tent or just sleeping in a doorway. That the stress of that and the mental health crises you could have. You could be the most stable person in the world, end up homeless, and you're gonna have mental health issues just by the mere fact of being a homeless person. It is not like some kind of picnic where you're having a grand old time. And so this is a very slippery slope where if it becomes, okay to do this in Canada, and then since we have dignity, death with dignity laws here in the United States, just like Canada once had, it could easily move to this kind of a situation. And what's really a shame, like for instance, the veteran, she just could not get the funding to actually have a wheelchair access to her house. I mean, that's crazy. A veteran can't have wheelchair access to her own house, or be able to be moved to a house where you could build wheelchair access, and then you're offering them death instead. I'm
going to jump in here, Keith McHenry, because people need to understand the architecture of the different kinds of government. It's not that she couldn't find a contractor willing to come out and nail a ramp. No. This is not what we're talking about.
No, this is just not having funding to provide adequate housing for her that was wheelchair accessible. There could have been an apartment building with an elevator,
As a vet, you write a blank check to the U.S. to any government, and you offer your life. You offer your life, whatever that means, for the betterment of the people whom you swear to serve and protect. And you put your ass on the line. In return for that blank check, you are promised by your government, Canada, the United States, wherever, that you'll be taken care of for the rest of your life, and that you will die with dignity, and that you won't starve to death, and that you'll have medical care. And it turns out that Canada is not dissimilar to the United States, dissimilar in that they do provide health care, but if they can get out of it, they will. In the United States, they just don't, unless it's demonstrably service related. Then the VA says, have a nice day. And we deal in the United States with so many homeless veterans, including 23% of all suicides are now vets. The number is astronomical, and a lot of it is from medical debt. And I'm concerned that they've not only been thrown to the curb and made invisible, and people do not have a good idea of who these people were, and don't get the contract that they made to give their lives, so that the rest of us could hopefully have a range of motion that we wouldn't otherwise have. At least that's our belief system. And that they were literally tossed to the curb, and that's what we're seeing in the curb. That's it.
Yeah. We're seeing the people that fought for our country just being thrown away like trash. And I mean, and then trying to, get benefits for vets and so on often is like incredibly difficult. And then what is also shocking is that the very first amount of money that the United States sent to Ukraine after the Russian invasion on February 24th was the same amount of money that Housing and Urban Development claims would end homelessness in the United States, including all those homeless vets. And yet, without even a debate in Congress or the Senate, we sent all this money to Ukraine, and we left our people on the streets. And now it's up to nearly $100 billion to Ukraine. And whether you like the
McHenry,
war or
I'm
not,
just going to repeat that because I want to think I had wax in my ear. What you said did not penetrate, so therefore I simply thought I understood that the amount of money sent to Ukraine in the beginning was sufficient to end all homelessness in America.
according to the Department of Housing and Urban Development, every single unhoused person could have been housed with that money. And yet we did not choose to do that. And like I had said earlier in the interview, we have known that there was going to be a homeless crisis since the beginning of the pandemic. And yet there was no, so billions of dollars were put into rent subsidies, which never made it to people to subsidize their rent. And in our county, for instance, you got 2 months rent paid if you qualified, and very few people did. And we saw a direct increase. As soon as the housing eviction moratorium was up, we started seeing larger numbers at our meal. Also, coincidentally, yesterday, a law was introduced in the, I think it was going to be introduced. I didn't see if it did, but it was advertised as being introduced, which would be similar to the LA law where they make it illegal to be in different areas of the community, and they keep expanding that. Or similar to the law that's in Tennessee, where it's a felony to be caught homeless outside on any public land. So on one hand, we're squeezing the unhoused, and we're considering the solution to be, right now, thankfully, not euthanasia in the United States, but basically to be criminalized and to be moved around in circles and end up in prison, or in some cases, he's completely, the one shelter that we have here in Santa Cruz, they call it the concentration camp. That's the nickname by the unhoused people, because they don't have the freedom to come and go as they want. They're basically wards of the state, and it definitely is a minimum security prison. So we're in Santa Cruz. We have the leaders of Google live here. We have the richest people in the world live here. And yet we have thousands of people just living on the streets. And we had a homeless encampment called the Benchlands for 2 years that Food Not Bombs and the Homeless Union was able to stop sweeps into the holiday sweeps a couple of years ago, and try to set up some kind of infrastructure, and tried to negotiate with the city and the county for 2 years to have adequate space for people. The city and the county just said, forget it, kick them into the woods, kick them into the doorways. And we've already seen hate crimes against homeless people as a direct result. I had a friend, Max, whose head was smashed by 2 teenage kids and videotaped for social media, because this horrible hatred of the homeless it's opening the door for things like euthanasia of the homeless, and it's really, really frightening. We have to really fight back, and the California law could start to evolve in that direction if we're not careful.
We're going to keep an eye on that, and thanks to you, Keith McHenry, we now know about this. You can learn more by going to Food Not Bombs website, which is Food Not Bombs, one word, foodnotbombs.net. That's foodnotbombs.net, and learn about what Keith McHenry has brought to you today. You can also get my free newsletter at CaryHarrison.com, where we'll have a transcript of this and other stuff that we weren't able to fit into this interview. I want to thank you so much, Keith McHenry. Thank you so much for ringing this clarion call of action and enlightenment, and allowing people to know what's going on so that they can impede it if they feel that's morally appropriate. But without knowing about it, there's nothing they can do. And because of you, we now do.
Thank you so much, Cary, for having me on. It's beautiful.
I appreciate it, my friend. We'll see you.